this is one I'm actually really curious. So you wrote the first book, Trust Me, I'm Lying. Like what? And you said 400,000 copies are sold now. Like what are the? How does the economics work? Like I was trying to explain to Brandon like the economics of a book, and I was like, why don't I just ask the guy who knows? For like everyone else who's curious, like, do you get rich off books? Like, how does it actually work?
I guess these are all relative terms.
Well, rich is relative, right? Yeah. Like, can you just walk us through the economics of that book?
Okay, so yeah, let's think. You want to talk about that book?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd written my previous book. I'd gotten a good advance for. I think it was like 250.
250,000.
Yeah, it was 200 with some earnouts. This is Trust Me, I'm Lying. So this is my first.
So when you got that first proposal, 200,000 for the book.
Yeah.
They just give you. Do they give you all up front?
No, it's in like 3 or 4 payments
before the book's even done.
It's like you get one payment when you sign the contract. It can. These are all things that in some ways that are negotiable, but it's like typically it's like you get a payment when you sign the contract. You get a payment when the book is accepted, like when you turn it in. You get a payment when it's published, and then you get a payment like either when it goes into paperback or when it's been out for a while.
How did you get such a high advance? That sounds like a lot.
I wrote a really good proposal. I wrote the entire book on spec. Like I wrote the book. I didn't need the money, so I wrote the book first. And it was a really good topic that no one had written about. Okay. And it was controversial. But they overpaid for it. That book still hasn't earned out its advance.
What does that mean? I know what it means, but I'm just...
Well, earn out means like, so your advance is an advance on royalties.
Okay.
So...
so they pay you the 250, but then you have to earn it back, basically?
Yeah, based on your percentage of the sales, which is 15... On a hardcover, it's 15% of the retail price.
Okay.
So you're making like...
So the book sells for $10, you get a buck
between like $1.50 and $3
on like a $10 book.
Well, yeah, but no, a book's retail price is not what it sells for on Amazon. It's what its listed price is.
So you get the percent of the listed price?
You get like let's say the book's $26.99.
Yeah.
My royalty would be 15% of that.
Oh, even if they sell it for 10?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they just take a lower cut themselves?
No, because they're selling it wholesale to the retailer at whatever, and then the retailer decides what they sell it at. So that's why it's not a percentage of what it sells for, because you don't control that. So it got a lot of attention. It did well, but I immediately wanted to sell the next book because I wanted to write about something else. But I was so far from earning out. I mean, I only had like 2 weeks of sales, and the publisher wasn't super excited about doing a book about Stoicism. So I took less than half for my second book.
The Ego's Away?
No, for Obstacles Away.
Obstacles Away.
So I took a lot less.
Why did you take so much less?
Because I really wanted to publish that book, and I knew that it would. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your advance is.
What do you mean?
It matters how many copies you sell, if you do earn out. So my first book, since I didn't earn out, it does matter how big my advance is. But Obstacle earned out within the first year, so now it just matters how many copies I sell.
How many do they keep selling afterwards? Because Obstacle, like Trust Me, I'm Lying and Obstacle have been out now, what, like 4 or 5 years?
Obstacle's been out for 3 years, and we're approaching the 5th anniversary of Trust Me, I'm Lying.
How many does that like sell in a day? I've always been like, I wonder if they keep selling.
It's mostly on a week by week basis is how they measure it. Yeah. So like Trust Me, I'm Lying sells like a couple hundred copies a week, maybe like between 1 and 200, which is better than most books.
Yeah. My free book doesn't even sell shit, and I'm like, it's fucking free, people. Like, no, okay, go search Amazon.
I would Obstacle sells between like 1,000 and 1,500 copies a week in the U.S.
Wow. What do you think? Is it just the word of mouth at that point?
Mm-hmm. That's what you're trying. You know how Jim Collins talks about the flywheel, trying to get the flywheel going.
Where it just like keeps running itself?
You're picking the right employees, the right market, you're doing all the right decisions, and then he says eventually the business gets the flywheel going, and then the flywheel spits off cash. That's what you're trying to do with a book. You're trying to write topic, write title, write cover, write marketing, write author, all these things. And now it's like I don't really do anything and it sells copies. That's what you want. So it's sold, and then it's in all these different languages. So those copies sell. Let's say it sold 100,000 copies in the UK. I make a lot less money on the copies it sells in the UK because I sold the rights to Penguin. Penguin sells the rights to Profile, who's a great publisher in the UK. So you'll hear about books that have sold, like they'll be like, oh, this book sold 1 million copies. So they could have made $3 million. Let's say they're making $3 a copy, which is unusual. So they made $3 million, or let's say they sold 100,000 copies in the US, but 900,000 copies in China, they might have made $350,000.
Interesting. So it really matters in the countries.
It matters what countries. It matters whether it's selling in paperback or hardcover. There's different royalty.
Digital.
Ebook is actually typically can be a better royalty. Audiobook is was for a while the best royalty. So depends on what you think being rich off a book is. To me, if you're making a living writing books, which very few people are doing, even a lower middle class living, that's pretty fucking good.
What other economics or things about books most people aren't aware of?
They are not aware of the... So with self-publishing, I think they go, oh, the math is so much better, right? Like James Altucher makes, let's say $5 or $6 a copy, right? But you only make the amount you make per copy if the book is a success. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so like 100% of zero is zero.
Yes. So most books aren't successful. So what you're doing when you take an advance is, like, ideally, if you're looking at it totally rationally, no company should ever raise money. You should always bootstrap, right? Because if it's gonna be successful, why would you be giving it away at such a lower valuation? Well, the reason you're not giving it away, you're taking risk off the table, one, and you're making it easier to be successful. So if I'd self-published The Obstacles Away and it sold 10,000 copies because I didn't have a publisher behind it, or because my editor didn't push me to get better, or because I was so fucking distracted running around trying to start a publishing company, I'm not sure that would have been more. So the math thing, I think people forget that every creative project is risky. Why doesn't Stephen King self-publish his books? Why doesn't Steven Spielberg fund his own money or fund his own movies? It's because it's risky. It's always better to play with other people's money. That's one. Most people don't think about how it's going to sell over time, which I think is
that's interesting.
People go like how many copies did The Great Gatsby sell in its first week, or how many copies did The 4-Hour Work Week or Good to Great or any of the classic books in the business genre? How many? It doesn't matter. What matters is that they sold for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years.
Yeah, I like that.
So they think short term when really it's actually better to think long term, and actually the money is better, right? Like, would you rather sell $3 million worth of books in 1 year and pay taxes on it that way, or would you rather sell $3 million worth of books? Not that I've sold $3 million worth of books. Or would you rather sell $3 million worth of books over 5 years and pay a significantly reduced taxes on it?
Over that.
That would be one way to think about it. And then I think people, for the vast majority of nonfiction, especially business, you make more money on things the book creates than on the book itself, right? So like...
Can you share a little more about that?
Okay, so my first book, I made, I told you what my advance was. I've made way more than that in clients that I've signed to do marketing for. The marketing company that I built makes more than that in a year, right? So building something around a book is very good. The problem is, most people don't understand that. Then the other problem is some people who do understand that then go, oh, it doesn't matter if the book sells any copies or not. But actually the best way, like the more copies the book sells, the more the book itself is a success, the more you get the other thing. So people go like, oh, like people will buy themselves onto the New York Times bestseller list as though that is a way to get, no. It would be better if it never hit the list, but every CEO in the country read your book.
I think that's a really interesting point, where it's not actually the book that you've made the majority of money. You made more money on the consulting and speaking of your marketing company, it sounds like, than the books themselves.
Not only that, the reason I was able to take half for my second book was that I didn't need the advance then either, because I had other stuff. Yeah. Like Jay-Z, I think about this for people who are much more successful than me. Jay-Z doesn't care how much money his music makes. Okay. So right, because he makes all his money from other things. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
no, I didn't know.
Like what I'm saying is like,
he makes money from like the next.
Okay, let's say Jay-Z has like a hit single tomorrow again. He makes like what, 9 to 11 cents a digital download, but like what does he make on a drink that you buy in the 40/40 Club? Right? So, but the music is why you're in the 40/40 Club. So if you have other sources of income or you have more of like an ecosystem, I think that makes Jay-Z a better musician, not a worse musician. I was able to write a book that my publisher maybe wasn't necessarily super excited about, and take less money for it because like I didn't need the advance to pay my bills.
Yeah, I really like that. I think the two concepts are, one, you also have multiple books. So once people have read the first book, they've liked it, then the next book, and then the next book.
The best marketing you can do for a book is to write another book.
Hi y'all, I'm Noah's mom. If you like what you're seeing, please give this video a share and leave a comment. Otherwise, I'll spank you. By the way, check out my playlist with Ryan Holiday for more goodies. Adios!